Never go for
Vatnik. One genre of video games that I have always loved is strategy games. I'm not the best, but I do enjoy playing them, and quite frankly, I'm pretty sure that's all that really matters. There has been times that I've considered going pro, since, hey, why not make money doing something that I enjoy doing? But I always end up deciding against the idea after seeing how good actual pros are at the various strategy games I enjoy. Although if I did go pro, I could still be a VTuber, since there are quite a few other VTubers who stream strategy games, such as the ones I'm showing right now. And I can still watch people who play strategy games for a living. I am a fan of Torier and Tommy K after all, and I can still just stream the genre for fun. But because I only have so much time on my hands, there is going to inevitably be some streamers and YouTubers who I decide against watching. So today, I'll be taking a look at arguably the most disgraced player of the grand strategy game Hearts of Iron 4, Grisha, also known as Grisha Putin, or Z-Shaker Central on Twitter. Now before we go any further, if you're unfamiliar with Hearts of Iron 4, it's a World War II grand strategy game by Paradox Interactive, who make a bunch of other grand strategy games. It's also commonly referred to as Hoi 4. Gameplay-wise, the extremely basic description I can think of is basically a real-time version of Civilization set in the World War II time frame. It also has an extensive modding scene, ranging from mods that just changed parts of the graphics to completely overhauling the game so that it can be set around alternate history timelines, or hell, even basically become an unofficial strategy game for various other franchises like Fallout and My Little Pony. I'm not making that one up, by the way, and I've streamed several of them before. Now, if you can't tell by the last name Grisha goes by online, I don't know what his real name is, or the title of the video, Grisha is a Russian. Now, that in and of itself is not a bad thing. Destiny is not determined by race, gender, sexuality, or ethnicity. Hell, Dmitry Glukovsky and NFKRZ are Russian. I do apologize to Mr. Glukovsky if I mispronounced your name, and I don't hold that against them. However, Grisha is notable because he happens to have pretty much tanked his future career because he bought into the propaganda surrounding the Russo-Ukraine war hook, line, and sinker. And I don't just mean he started voicing pro-Russian statements. No, he actually turned into a propaganda streamer, I think the correct term would be in this case, for the Wagner company. And yes, Prigozhin's fate does play into this. But this is somewhat interesting for me since I actually don't know much about the guy, at least prior to when I started making this video. So I'm going to try and go into this with an open mind. But first, the usual disclaimer, don't harass anyone I mention in this video. I doubt this video would reach anyone who would actually try and harass Grisha, so I'm just putting this here to be safe. Although, quite frankly, given how badly he's screwed over his career, I don't think you need to harass him to make himself more miserable than he already has. Now, this essay is one that has a bit more of a personal connection to me, since not only do I have a 4-digit playtime in the game, but I also took the last half of my VTuber persona from the Hearts of Iron 4 mod, The New Order, The Last Days of Europe, since I wouldn't have found out about the guy in question, Mitchell Werbel III, without playing the mod. As a result, I have decided to use the game's OST as BGM for this essay, with one exception, which was the brand new intro I added, which uses the GoldenEye Source rendition of GoldenEye 64's Damn theme. So without further ado, let's get started.
That's why I think Grisha is so much better than Dan, because this guy actually has funny memes, dude.
Grisha used to be one of the Hearts of Iron 4 streamers wwho was associated with Bakoen1, a Danish streamer of the game. Now, it should be noted that he was kind of controversial beforehand. For example, he'd talk a big game, but in one instance, he apparently got eliminated very early on in a 1v1 tournament against someone who was a nobody. I would show a clip here, but I couldn't actually find a stream of that, so it could be false. Yet, many of Bo's fans did appreciate Grisha's presence, as seen in this Reddit post, which has quite frankly aged like milk. It was probably because he went the extra mile LARPing, which, given that Bo himself has actually worn a Girls und Panzer play on stream, many fans found quite funny. And for what it's worth, Grisha was willing to play as the USSR quite a bit, which meant that you could have other players not worry about who got assigned to that nation. And even if you did want to play as the USSR, Bo's games did allow for people to play co-op on nations, meaning that you could, for example, have someone controlling the Navy and Air Force while you had another person controlling the Army and working on diplomatic efforts. In fact, One of the things that likely didn't set off red flags for people was the fact that, in general, Hearts of Iron 4 has a habit of attracting people who, politically, are less likely to be in the center. A common joke is that everyone who plays Hearts of Iron 4 is either a fascist or a socialist. Although it's also worth noting that it's kind of seen as a trans game in the same vein as Fallout New Vegas. And that's not just my opinion. Hassan Piker, of all people, says so, and to my knowledge, he's never played the game.
Start recognizing that you're trans. You might have internalized transphobia, okay? Then you slowly but surely start recognizing you're trans. You start doing the, like, Femboy Fridays. You're doing the coder socks, right? But then there's a second step. You start playing Fallout New Vegas, modded, or you start playing fucking Hearts of Iron, and then all of a sudden, all the names...
Given that there's one stream of Bose where everyone LARPed as the leader of their country, I can absolutely believe that people just thought Grisha was just playing a character. Although that became impossible to believe after the Russo-Ukraine war broke out.
The answers to these questions are complex.
Is that Grisha,
and
bro?
uncertain.
Oh no, that's the winning side. That can't be Grisha.
With a lot of...
Now, Grisha isn't the only Bakoan 1 regular who stopped appearing in Bo's videos. Gressel stepped away because, well, he was a chud, and Bo didn't want anything to do with him. Rilber stopped appearing because he unfortunately passed away. But Grisha is a different story, because he started going full Vatnik once the war broke out. And it's not like he joined the armed forces or got drafted and, as a result, could not show up. Although, from what I can tell, he did actually want to join as the Russian armed forces. But rather, he basically became a Wagner or spoke streamer. While there were signs from even before the war began, such as when he posted a video that, in hindsight, is incredibly in poor taste called How to Conquer Ukraine as Russia in Hoi 4, and when the war actually began, Bo himself called Grisha out for that on his stream where he was reacting to the developments as they were happening. Bo's subreddit in particular began to take note of how far Grisha had fallen, with several posts expressing disbelief or anger at what Grisha had started to become. It's worth noting that r/non-credible defense also talked about Grisha, but it was done more in a mocking way as opposed to Bakoan 1 subreddit, which the posts there honestly come across more as someone who felt betrayed by Grisha. Hell, even a post made before the war, which was a Grisha appreciation post, got dragged back up. While Bo and his other friends did distance themselves from Grisha, the person who arguably became Grisha's biggest detractor was Tommy K. If you're unfamiliar with Tommy K, he's a German Hearts of Iron 4 streamer. However, unlike Grisha, Tommy K has actually served in the military of his country. I believe he was a tanker, if I'm not mistaken. And although Tommy K is not particularly, militaristic, and considering that Germany probably isn't going to go on the warpath anytime soon after, well, everything that happened in the 20th century, I don't think we'll see Tommy K go through the same thing Grisha did. From what I can tell, Tommy K himself did get along with Grisha before the war, although I've heard mixed reports on how Grisha was viewed in Tommy K's subreddit. After the Russo-Ukraine war began, however, Tommy K has only really brought up Grisha as a punching bag whenever something he can use as an opportunity to do so comes up. Usually whenever he's reacting to something. In fact, I actually decided to use clips of their interactions as transition footage because of this. Now, while I was doing research for this video on Bakoan 1 subreddit, I stumbled across a point left by a few commentators that made me reconsider the tone I was taking with this video. Grisha grew up in Putin's Russia, with the exception of the 4 years that Dmitry Medvedev was in charge of the country, and even then you could still argue that Putin was still in charge since he was prime minister at the time. Putin's leadership is all Grisha has known. I found myself seriously wondering, should I really be taking a tone like this with someone who, if I was in the situation they had been in, I could have very well have walked down the same path they were walking down? And then I found this comment Grisha left denying the Bucha massacre. Yeah, that was when any sympathy I had for Grisha didn't just evaporate, it caught on fire and started to burn down everything in its path. Given that he had gone full Vatnik by this point, to the point where I was too tempted to not make a particular edit to the scene from Tropic Thunder that I used in the intro, it was inevitable that Twitch would do something. Now, after the war began, Grisha basically fully embraced Russian propaganda. As I mentioned earlier, it's pretty common for Hoi 4 to attract people from a lot of different ideologies. But there's a difference between simply embracing a meme and LARPing and fully buying into an ideology. Grisha fell into the latter category. Unsurprisingly, Twitch eventually acted on Grisha. Oddly enough, he actually managed to avoid getting banned for the entirety of 2022. But 2023 is a different story. On January 16th, he actually got his first ban. Now, it's not that surprising that he got banned, given that Twitch had started to crack down on streamers who spread narratives from the Kremlin after the war started. If you want another example of this, one name I brought up in a previous video who got hit with a ban that's very likely permanent is Hawes2holes from Infrared.
There are only 2 holes! Whoa! There are only 2 holes! Whoa!
And seeing as how this is the second video essay in a row where I've mentioned him, I probably should do a video on 2holes at some point. I think I found what I'm gonna do for when I hit 100 subscribers. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. What is surprising about his ban is the date, since most of the cases I found of people getting banned because of Twitch cracking down on Kremlin propaganda, people who got banned in 2022. Yet Grisha did not get hit as part of that wave, and as far as I can tell, Twitch didn't do a second wave of bannings. Or at least if they did, none of them showed up on streamer bans. If I had to guess, I'd say the reason he likely didn't get banned in 2022 is because, well, people likely don't tune into a Hoi4 stream to hear serious updates about the Russo-Ukraine war in the same way they would tune into the stream of someone like Lonerbox or Dylan Burns. But, well, in 2023, he started openly associating with the Wagner Group. And there's even one stream that he did wearing full Russian military attire, complete with the Z symbol. I could not find video, but I did find a screenshot. Grisha's first ban was for 14 days. His second ban, which was on May 15th, also lasted 14 days. It came right after he debated the Ukrainian streamer Topsin on May 9th. In the debate, Grisha kind of proved he only saw the Russian army presented in propaganda, as evident by him citing numerical superiority and technological superiority. This is in spite of the fact that Russia has had to resort to recruiting prisoners with the promise of pardoning them in return for serving, has had to severely limit the deployment of their equivalent of the F-22 Raptor, the Su-57 Felon, because the West's blockade has prevented them from manufacturing more, and has become so desperate for armor that not only are they reactivating older models of tanks, but they actually had to pull something straight out of Mad Max and weld an 80-year-old naval gun onto an MTLB, an APC from the 70s. However, his third ban, which is his current one, and given that it's still active at the time of publishing, is one that I'm inclined to say is permanent, or at least is going to last until the end of the Russo-Ukraine war. He was banned for his third and likely final time on September 2023, which, according to Grisha himself, the reason given was promoting terrorism, since aside from the fact that, well, he was pretty much streaming as a Wagner spokesstreamer, his donations were being sent to support the Russian armed forces. Twitch considers the Russian armed forces a terrorist organization, and it's not like this is the only time they've come down hard on someone for promoting terrorism. Less than 3 months after Grisha's likely final ban, Twitch would use the same reasoning, albeit for a different conflict, to perma-ban the streamer Kirachats, also known as Bad Bunny. You might know her from this clip.
$5 a month!
Grisha got really upset over this and actually called on the Russian government to ban the entire website of Twitch in response. Never mind the fact that Grisha could still stream on the other 3 big streaming sites, and he also had been streaming on this Russian streaming site called VK. However, his pleas fell on deaf ears, since while Twitch does freeze transactions to Russian bank accounts, the site itself does still allow Russian viewers to access it. You just need to go to the website. You don't even need a VPN. And in a Telegram statement, which I've translated and will link to a Pastebin in the description, he said his ban was unfair and called on the Russian government to give Twitch the same treatment they gave Facebook and Instagram, which, as I mentioned, was to ban the site. He cited the fact that Twitch hasn't imposed the same restrictions on Ukrainian streamers that they imposed on Russian streamers. Although he conveniently forgets that many of those Ukrainian streamers are streaming within miles of, if not right next to, the front lines, and there's at least one case of someone who was streaming in Ukraine getting shelled on stream, Dylan Burns. On the other hand, many Russian streamers are streaming far away from the front lines. Unsurprisingly, Grisha started streaming on Kick, although that hasn't really worked out for him so far, since he only gets like 5 to 7 viewers on his streams on average, which is kind of embarrassing since, while it's true that Kick does not have as big a user base as Twitch or YouTube, the site has been accused of using bots to inflate their views in the past. Well, I'm pretty sure that I get more views on my YouTube streams on average than Grisha gets on his Kick streams. Now, if you were paying attention to the dates I listed, you probably noticed that the time he got unbanned a second time and the time he got banned a third time overlap with a certain pair of events. So, let's talk about how Grisha took Prigozhin's march on Moscow.
Kaliningrad. East Prussia is temporarily occupied.
I'm pretty sure that you all know this already if you've been paying attention to the war, but on June 23rd, 2023, the Wagner Group decided to turn against the Russian government, launching a coup. The coup ended roughly 1 day later with Prigozhin standing down after the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, negotiated a deal. I'm sure you're all aware of what happened a few months later. Given that Grisha had become a spokesman for the Wagner Group, or would it spokesstreamer be the more appropriate term, he obviously did not take this well. And before you ask, Grisha's 18 at the time I started writing this essay. However, before Prigozhin's death, Grisha accepted an interview from another Slavic Hearts of Iron 4 YouTuber by the name of Slavic303. Slavic is someone who's been involved in some other drama with another Hearts of Iron 4 YouTuber named seduction. I do hope I pronounced that correctly, which I'm not going to get into in this video because it would probably derail the whole video. I do remember Slavic303 starting off more neutral towards Grisha than most other Hearts of Iron 4 YouTubers. I can't show you anything to back this up since, well, Slavic303 deleted his channel and the particular video in question has become lost media. Now, it's actually kind of commendable for Slavic303 to reach out to Grisha, since the rest of the Hoi 4 community had pretty much shunned Grisha, and while Slavic303's channel has since been deleted, the interview was fortunately re-uploaded by someone, and I'll link it below in the description. I think that it was actually a good idea for Slavic303 to reach out to Grisha and get his side of the story because, hey, who knows, maybe perhaps Grisha just needed someone to tell him the other side. But that's not what happened. In fact, the interview may have been a fatal mistake on Slavic303's part, as I'm not making this up, Slavic303 apparently joined the Wagner Group, and according to seduction, the last contact Grisha and Slavic303 had was in February. Given that Slavic303 has no other social media to my knowledge, I can only assume the worst. Now, before I conclude things, there's one more piece of the puzzle that is Grisha Putin.
Oh shit! This is me when my tanks get circled Hoi 4, bro.
All the news that have happened so far.
Now, before I get into the next segment, let me give you a bit of context. Sign My Rocket is a Ukrainian organization that basically lets you pay money to have Ukrainian soldiers write stuff on artillery shells, or if you're willing to pay out more money, other munitions, and in turn the Ukrainian soldiers will fire said shells or munitions. And if you're willing to shell out more money, you can even have them film a video of your shell or rocket it getting fired. So naturally, Grisha opted to basically rip this off with a very questionable counterpart. Although it's very questionable how many of the shells he's claiming to sign actually get signed. I say this because of a combination of not only what my own eyes can see, but also ELA, or error level analysis, which should not be confused with ERA, or explosive reactive armor, as both former anti-tank soldier and Newsmax contributor Ryan Macbeth and former British military intelligence analyst and patron saint of r/non-credible defense Laserpig have pointed out, there are identical defects in the casings of many of the shells that Grisha has posted on his Twitter account, albeit on different locations, likely suggesting that he just put the same shells in different positions before turning them and putting the photos on them. As for the error level analysis part, this was something I didn't even know existed and was very interested in finding out about when I did actually learn about its existence. Because Grisha's post went viral, he got called out by, surprisingly enough, someone from the People's Republic of China who brought this up. Basically, they found that there were a few where Grisha had actually drawn on the shells, likely so he could claim that he was actually drawing stuff on them, but on others, he did a really good job of Photoshop, as you can see by the watermark on the Trump 2024 shell. And of course, that's not even getting into the fact that, as he himself has admitted, these shells are North Korean, so it's very possible that they could end up as duds. Now, I'd say that the most likely scenario is that Grisha took a few shells, took photos of them, and with the few exceptions that I already mentioned, just Photoshop the drawings onto them. I guess the one positive I could say about this is he's not using AI art, although I imagine that if someone was to inform him about how much Shadiversity would probably pay if Grisha did start using AI art, he'd probably change his mind on that. Also possible, but less likely, is that Grisha is repainting the same shells. Now, if Grisha sees this, there's a very easy way to prove me, and everyone I've mentioned so far, wrong. All you have to do is actually record yourself drawing the stuff on the shells by hand. Although, as I mentioned, even if you are actually drawing stuff on them by hand, it's very questionable if the shells will even work, since you yourself have admitted they're North Korean, and they were probably just gathering dust and decaying in a warehouse for like more than a few decades. But I'm going to guess you won't do that if you do see this video. You know, I cannot say I expected to wind up writing about Grisha when I started making video essays. And if you had told me I would be writing about Hearts of Iron 4 when I first started out, I would have guessed that it would be about one of the many overhaul mods or my experience with the game, not one of the many streamers, let alone Grisha. But life is full of unexpected surprises. I had a hard time deciding how I wanted to end this. I guess I could address Grisha directly, even though there's a good chance he won't see this. You've destroyed your career since I can't see Bo's group accepting you, and I don't think any of the streamers who don't associate with Bo would take you either. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you won't be able to rebrand as a VTuber, which I've seen some questionably problematic streamers try and do. All I can say is, for right now, I hope you have fun. No, really. We both know that Russia's gonna change their conscription laws from all adults serve to scraping the barrel any day now, so you'll get your wish of seeing the front lines, which I'm gonna guess you'll regret rather quickly. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hopefully the next time I talk about Hearts of Iron 4, I'm actually talking about the game itself and not a problematic layer of the game. But for now, I'm Andreas, and I'll see you on my next assignment. Later.